Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of PredRev Live. We're really excited to have you all on again today. I'm just going to give everyone a couple of minutes to kind of trickle in here before we get started. But maybe we can take this opportunity just to make a couple of introductions here. If you guys are new to PredRev Live, if you haven't caught either of us before, let my colleague introduce herself here.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining, those who are here so far. So I'm Lavinia and I head up service design at Predictable Revenue. Some of you may recognize me from the Outbound Labs videos. Done a few of those in the past and kind of appeared here. So yeah, it's always great to get to chat with some of you and kind of engage in this way and just share some of what we've been finding internally, especially LinkedIn today. Yeah, just have a chat with you all and Sarah about what we're doing at the moment, and hopefully give you some great ideas how to adapt your outbound.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, really looking forward to chatting to you about some of the things that have changed when it comes to LinkedIn, what worked really well last year, what we found still works and what doesn't maybe work so well anymore. So yeah, for those of you that don't know me, I am Sarah Hicks. I'm a senior SDR for Predictable Revenue. I am also the podcast host, so maybe you've seen my face there. Lavinia and I got our little videos up wherever we can. And yeah, so I just want to take the time to let you guys know that we're so happy to have you guys every week for the PredRev Lives that we want to just beef it up and give you even more next week. So we are having our very first super stream. So it's going to be similar format. It's going to be right here where you watch these PredRev Lives, but we're actually going to have some external people on and we're going to cover some specific topics. So external guests for this round are going to be Josh Braun, Kevin Gilman, and Rex Biberston. From the Predictable Revenue team, we will have Colin Stewart, Brandon, Tyler, and myself. And we will be tackling leveraging LinkedIn to crush outbound sales. So a little bit of a kind of extension and elaboration on what Lavinia and I are going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the secret formula to building sequences that convert. And we're going to talk about psychological prospecting, the quick fixes that maximize replies. So make sure that you guys hit that subscribe button so that you're notified for next week. Tell your friends, send them a LinkedIn message, send them an email, let them know to join us for our super stream. But anyway, back to today, back to what we're covering now. So as Lavinia mentioned, a lot of things have changed this year when it comes to LinkedIn and how we connect and engage with potential leads on that platform. And we want to make sure that you guys are aware of these changes that we've found. We did a lot of Outbound Labs experiments last year around LinkedIn. We're going to take a look at those, the results there, how those results have changed and how we're kind of implementing the changes that we've found in our LinkedIn prospecting today. So the kind of what we'll cover today is LinkedIn as a channel, as a whole. We'll talk about those Outbound Labs experiments from 2019, what's changed, what we're doing now, and a little bit on how you guys can implement that. So without further ado, Lavinia, talk to us about LinkedIn as a channel.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's relevant to start with LinkedIn first started becoming popular as a channel for outbound, probably about kind of two years, 18 months ago. I know that's when we really started tapping into it and saw like huge success here internally at Predictable Revenue. And it was great. It was a time, email as always, like getting more challenging. You've got to be like super defined on your ask and your targeting. There was deliverability issues that were coming up. I'm thinking, okay, if we're saying like relevant things to the right people, there are so many other firewalls that you have to get through on email that we found more and more challenging. And we're like, why don't we try LinkedIn? And we found like loads of traction there, lots of success. And naturally, with any channel, when the word gets out and when everyone at the same time obviously looks at other channels, that's when like the noise grows. Not always a bad thing. Naturally, it kind of forces the whole sales side of things and outbound, constantly adapt and grow. But there is that move towards that saturation point, as with any channel. And what that really means is that you just have to be more on the ball and on point with like your strategy and your channel and your sequences, messaging, your list building. So it teaches you to be really, really strict and really disciplined with how you're reaching out to people. So I think this is a really great look at especially some of the experiments we did back. It must be kind of mid 2019 now. Kind of what we were focusing on then, how we were trying to optimize then compared to like what we're doing to optimize now, kind of 18 months later, because I'm sure a lot of you are aware, like, yeah, in the last 18 months, LinkedIn has really picked up in a channel as a channel. So there's a lot more to focus on how we can like make sure we're still getting the best results possible and using the best tactics. So, you know, when you've got a good prospect, you've got a good message, that it's not being lost in the noise or they're becoming, you know, fatigued of getting requests.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about some of those key experiments that we did back in 2019 and our findings there. You, Lavinia, were kind of in charge of a lot of those, running those experiments yourself, and certainly on the team with everyone as those experiments were being run. So yeah, give us some of those.
Yeah, absolutely. So with kind of any new channel, there are some of those like really basic elements that you need to find out how to optimize. So like list building is the first one. Like naturally, we all know how to build like a good email list. That's kind of one method of going at it. But when it comes to building lists on LinkedIn, that was like a big new kind of challenge that we had to work out. What was the best way to optimize it? As anyone here who's used Sales Nav Search may also be familiar that it's not always the most accurate, that reliable. You can get some wild cards in there. However, specifically, you try and like build out those lists and put in those parameters. So that was like really one of the first areas that we wanted to test. Like, how can we optimize our list building to make sure that we are reaching out to people we think we're reaching out to? Like, you know, it's like every prospect is like worst nightmare to have someone reply and be like, oh, it's not relevant, not right. And then you look and you're like, gosh, it's not, but I spent so much time on this list. I made sure I like looked through it and like all the parameters were there. Like no one wants to see that. So like, okay, how can we really like optimize it as much as possible? And one experiment we did here to test was we compared using the Sales Nav Search and those parameters to a method where we built the list of companies outside of LinkedIn. So we actually did some like manual company list building, used some other email list providers. So we kind of used Zoom Info a bit, just to find companies that we knew really specifically fitted the targets. And then we took those companies and we actually added them as a Boolean search to Sales Nav in the company section. So that way we knew exactly that it was like exactly the right companies. Kind of, we'd done our due dil. We knew these were the right companies. And then we still built out the personas in Sales Nav, because we found that often the personas were right. If you kind of got that company base, the persona we built in Sales Nav. So we tested this across several different clients. So 2 campaigns, one kind of purely Sales Nav built list, one was the company list that was built outside. And we found that actually for all of the experiments we did, the list with the companies built outside of Sales Nav and then kind of added as a Boolean search to Sales Nav always had a higher booked meeting rate than the purely Sales Nav list build. I think there was actually one experiment where it was like over a 50% higher booked meeting rate. So that's pretty wild difference to how you build your lists.
Definitely. Yeah, I think list building is a key difference, definitely in between email and LinkedIn prospecting. And so have you found that still applies? Do you still get the higher response rate if you're doing a Boolean list where it's very, very accurate?
Yeah, so that's definitely something we're still doing. I think it's something that it's one of those like standard core pieces that's always going to be relevant. So that's definitely something we keep doing. And we noted when we go on to kind of how we've changed the approach we're doing now, it's a big focus is really around like a lot more specific, smaller targeted list building. So yeah, this approach is crucial really to make sure that you are like having really segmented lists, you know, like exactly the characteristics, even beyond some kind of the standard list building criteria, kind of looking at like taking into consideration location as far as like city and towns, kind of like the time of year, kind of like obviously the climate currently, like all these small little details means that we have to be like more and more focused on list building, and this is like a perfect approach to it. So yeah, I mean I'd be interested to hear if anyone who's listening in kind of is this an approach you've tried as well? Is it something that you haven't, that you think you'd be interested, that kind of would work well? It'd be great to hear your feedback. So I think it's something that, yeah, we tested back then, and now we kind of sometimes take a bit for granted, but obviously we're like, yeah, who is it, how are other people taking this approach to list building, really making sure you're getting it on point?
Yeah, definitely. That would be wonderful. Throw in the comments on YouTube, guys. Maybe, yeah, if this sounds like it would be a helpful strategy, if it's something that you have tried, or if you even have an alternative that you've found has allowed you to kind of avoid those outliers from kind of ending up in your prospect list. I know even when I'm building lists, still today, you find yourself like you build the perfect list, perfect parameters. You go and have a look at that saved lead search to have a check. And there's like, I'm targeting sales directors, and I'll find like sales development rep. And I'm like, how did they end up at the like director and above sales leader search? But anyway, okay, let's talk about connection requests and kind of what we found works there. Before we do, I'm not being rude, I'm grabbing a treat for my dog because she's being a bit of a
let's say
and
let's say
she's gonna okay, there we go. Otherwise she's gonna jump around behind me and try to bite me the whole time. Okay, so connection requests.
Connection request, fab. So this was another one we tried out as well, and this was again kind of like really early days when we started first really testing out some what were the best ways to optimize LinkedIn. And here we had a hypothesis around what would perform best. Kind of, would a blank invite seek a higher connection rate and then a better conversion rate ultimately? Or was it best to put a message in that connection request? The idea behind this as well was, obviously, if you're reaching out to kind of third degree connections, you kind of want to have some relevance. But if people are a bit scared off by a sales pitch and kind of, you know, see that and they're like, oh no, don't want to touch that. But then if you don't send a request, you're not really adding context to who you are, especially at that third degree connection. Kind of second degrees, you have lots of connections and mutual, there's something a bit more there, but especially with third degree, so we're like, okay, let's test it, kind of, because obviously there's lots of theories around that we like what we thought would happen. So we tried it across again, as also like was always with a few different clients, and again we did the standard kind of 2 campaigns side by side, exactly the same. One, we just didn't put any message in the connection request, and the other we did decide to put in a really short and sweet kind of message that went with the connection request. And initially the results were really varied. There was like no consistency across them between the different clients, and they didn't even really seem to be any kind of significant difference between the blank connection request and the connection request itself. It kind of like, yeah, it was completely all over the place. It was really difficult to try and decipher. So then like we took a step back and we tried to look at a different angle. We were like, okay, so maybe it's not just as super basic and high level as having like a message or no message. Maybe we need to like tailor and kind of like refine, like, what do we mean by message? Kind of like what's in that message? And so we did a bit more workshopping there to work out kind of what can we put into that message. And we found that focusing on I see we have X area in common, or we have X common ground, be that kind of the industry that you're working in, interests are kind of around problem solving. Are both your companies looking at problem solving? Is it always, or was it even down to like your specific roles, like you're working on similar problems within your company? So it was like finding that common ground. So that's then the message we tried. And once we tried that style of message versus the blank connection request, that specific style of message definitely helped increase connection rate and also booked meetings rate. So that was a big one that we took, saying kind of just over a year, kind of 18 months ago. That was like a strategy we went in on because that showed really compelling results. And it was a great way to kind of make sure that when you were reaching out to people, there was kind of like, you showed the intent, you showed why you were doing it, and it was a really short pithy statement. People could read it and they kind of like, you know, got it straight away what was going on.
Right.
That was a really great one. But yeah, as we'll come to when we go on to what changed now, this is like a perfect example of something that's changed completely. So yeah,
Interesting. Interesting. Okay. So yeah, we'll put that on the back burner. We'll come to what we're doing now with that in a little bit. Um, let's talk about how you actually scheduled that meeting. So say you've gotten to the point where somebody's agreed to have the meeting, you book that meeting with a closer or for yourself, whatever that looks like. What did in 2019, what did we find to be the best way to confirm a meeting time and get that meeting scheduled?
Yeah, so this came from, naturally, if you're reaching out to people on LinkedIn, there's the pre-element that you don't have to source the emails. So that's kind of a barrier that's taken away initially, but then it becomes later down the line, it's not so easy to send over an invite, because then there's that extra step, there's that extra ask. And we all know, obviously, we want to try and like reduce how much like back and forth there is, get straight to that book meeting confirmed. But obviously when you need to find out their email, and you want to confirm that email with them, it kind of adds in that extra step. So what we wanted to find out was how could we, when we have that email or when we source that email elsewhere, how can we then kind of like reduce that conversion time? Because naturally kind of like adding in any steps, and then people maybe aren't checking LinkedIn as often as they would their email. We found that there was a much longer gap from even when someone says, yes, I'm open to a meeting, to actually scheduling that meeting and getting that time booked in. So we're like, okay, why don't we give it a go by sending just a placeholder? So the idea of just sending a placeholder was we suggest a couple of times, and then you send over a placeholder for about kind of 5 working days time, so far enough out, and then let the prospect know, hey, I've sent over a placeholder. Does this time work for you? So you're almost kind of like second guessing, getting ahead of a bit. The idea is that then if that time does work, yeah, it's really easy for them, accept the calendar invite, great, you don't need to keep going kind of like back and forth. And comparing that versus kind of doing the classic like back and forth, confirm meeting time, does this time, here are 3 times, which one works for you? Yeah, that's okay, going there. So that's what we wanted to try. We were like, okay, let's see how this goes. It didn't actually increase the booked meeting rates and people showing up to meetings. In fact, there were quite a few instances where people would either accept the invite or kind of wouldn't even respond to the meeting invite, wouldn't respond to the LinkedIn message, and then naturally, obviously, they didn't show up, which is kind of understandable. I see that. But it did, in the few instances where it did work for the individual, it reduced the amount of time taken to schedule the meeting, in some cases up to like 3 days, which is like huge, spending like 3 days having to keep going back and forth with a particular prospect to like book the meeting. But I think that the key takeaway from this one was that it is a bit hit and miss. Like we didn't find it was like a consistent strategy, and if anything, with some people it had the opposite effect. Maybe not unsurprisingly, always like to test these things out and see what the results are. But it's not something we carried on consistently doing. We did find that, doing the classic couple of suggested times, finding their email, while it did take longer, once you had someone who was willing to have a meeting, it was definitely the most consistent way to go when it came to actually making sure they got on that call, and obviously not like rubbing them the wrong way before you actually even get on that meeting. So yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, looking forward to hearing how that has changed as we tackle what's changed next. Okay, the last 2019 experiment that we want to talk about is using tangible results in a connection message. So first, Lavinia, kind of give us context on what you mean by giving tangible results in a connection message.
Yeah, absolutely. So tangible results were just kind of metrics. Kind of we reduce cost by 50%. We reduce time taken by 75%. So using something like that that's really clear and defined. This is something definitely in the email world as well. It's one of those tactics that, like everything, it kind of works for a bit and then kind of fade out. We're like, well, what happens if we translate it over to a different channel? Is it going to have a different impact there? These results, or should I say these experiments, were pretty short and sweet, as they're very definitive results. It definitely lowered the connection rate. And I think it having those tangible results in there, kind of going straight in with the like X cost reduction, X time saving, and on reflection, and especially now, is when you're using LinkedIn, like it's such a social channel. Like it's not email, it's not like formally business, like it's social. And then naturally the style of prospecting has to adapt to that social side of things. I know Brandon, who does it on there, he's very big on, you know, the social selling and the like adapting that strategy and that style of outreach. And tangible results, as we found out very early on, is not a social way of selling. Like if we're at an event, I don't know, it might be a distant memory for most people now, but you're meeting people, you wouldn't go up and opening Gambit and just be like, hey, we can save you 50% on your hiring costs. You'd be like, whoa, hi, nice to meet you too. Like, and I think the same kind of principle applies for LinkedIn as well. And this is one of those findings that we found that is still relevant now. Like LinkedIn is still a social channel, and it's still something you always want to be like really aware of when it comes to like the style of messaging, exactly how you're reaching out to people, kind of what your intent behind all the messages is. But yeah, this was a perfect example that it's a social channel. So you can save all that good stuff, you know, when you get on the phone and share the case studies and getting the results. Like LinkedIn isn't the place to dive into that.
Awesome. Cool. Well, let's move on to what we're doing now. So one of the key experiments that you mentioned has really changed is the blank invite versus the style of the specific style of connection request that mentions kind of a mutual interest or mutual skill or mutual industry. Tell us how you think that's changed now.
Yeah, absolutely. So the sharing common ground, and kind of as we refer to it, is like the knowledge share approach. Was like, it was a solid result, almost like guaranteed for us, kind of, yeah, like a year ago. It worked really well. And then it's kind of as with any channel, you kind of notice, you know, different tactics aren't as effective as they were maybe like a month ago, 6 months ago, start changing them. And this is one of those examples that we found really started not having as solid results as it used to be. Like, still works, you know, it's not a poor approach. It's definitely something that I think to people like listening, I'd recommend like try like testing it out kind of in the spirit of Outbound Labs. I think especially like everything we're saying and talking about here today, it should be like ideas of what you can go away and test. Like ultimately everything's different and everything's nuanced, and the only way you can really find out is kind of do those solid like A/B tests. But we found that using that approach was something that we've almost fully moved away from now, 12 months down the line. And I think the reason for that is kind of, it's a fewfold, and it comes back to also what we're saying about like the style of list building, and how we want to have those really small and nuanced lists. And how LinkedIn as a channel, you know, as more and more people start to use it and it reaches a higher level of saturation, we have to be way more specific about our outreach. And this all kind of ties into the biggest success we're finding at the moment is focusing a lot more on one of the key areas is the type of connection that you're reaching out to. So is it a second connection? Is it a third connection? Are you in the same group as them? Kind of what exactly is it? So if they're a second connection, a great kind of connection message is, I see we have lots of people in common, lots of connections in common, or we all know the same kind of people, would love to connect, as we're clearly in the same area. Third degree connection is like directly referencing that. I can see that we're not directly connected, but we seem to work in the same space, have the same interests. So it's still along the same lines of like establishing that mutuality. So that's naturally like, that's such a human thing, and it's such a basis of kind of like the outbound and the psychology side of it. But it's just being more specific. So just purely, I see we have X ground in common. It's too vague. I think it's like everything. That's definitely the trend over the last year or so, is like, you just have to be a lot more specific about what you're saying, and like a lot more precise about the message. So rather than being like, we have mutual ground in this, it's, oh, I can see we have loads of people in common, or we don't, but that's odd, but it would be great to connect with you. I've seen some of your, I saw an article you shared or content, it's kind of around that, just being a lot more specific, and showing that you've like done that research and you actually know who you're reaching out to. So that's really, really something that we've seen has had a big impact.
And that's interesting because that's obviously the way that email and the phone have gone too, right? Like every channel, the thing that works now is this ultra personalization, because it's almost like every other tactic that has like come out and been tried has lost its power. There's no kind of quick, gimmicky, automated way that you can reach out to anybody anymore. It's got to be ultra relevant, ultra personalized. And that's the only way that you're going to cut through.
Yeah, absolutely, like completely. And it's also interesting looking at kind of the timelines. Like every time it shifts to a different channel, the time to saturation is like significantly reducing as well. So it's like it's even more prevalent that we have to be more specific, more personalized, kind of like know who we're reaching out to and why. Like it's not, you can't get away with kind of second guessing or kind of hoping you've got it right. Like there's way more level of like personalization and research that goes into it, which is like no bad thing. No one wants to be getting invites and connections for something that's like completely irrelevant to them, but it just means we have to be a lot more like focused on how we do that outreach.
Awesome. And the one last one from 2019 that we talked about changing a little bit was how you guys schedule that meeting and send over the calendar invite. What does that look like today?
Yeah, no, that's a full no. We still try and go for the initial connection, and then there are a couple of different ways that we're around scheduling the meeting. So either kind of move it to email almost straight away, kind of once you get that interest, kind of like hop over to email and kind of initiate that change rather than trying and doing the scheduling within LinkedIn. Okay. Another one is dependent on whether you're the person who's doing the taking that call. So if you're booking the meeting and then handing that straight over to another rep or someone inside your organization, the best practice is then to actually loop in that person to the LinkedIn message, and then either, depending on your process, kind of let them reach out directly via email, or then also directly reach out to them on email and CC in that rep as well. Because then it gives whoever's taking that call, obviously, the context on LinkedIn, and then also you're following up on email as well.
Interesting. I guess that kind of makes sense, because you don't want your communication forever with a prospect or a customer to exist within LinkedIn. And even after the first meeting, if you'd managed to get it scheduled through LinkedIn, the communication thereafter would be on email. Yeah. So it makes sense to just pull it over right away.
Yeah, definitely. And there's definitely, I think now, especially, it's not across all companies, but with channels like LinkedIn, or even kind of like using Slack, there's a bit more of like that informal, again, it comes back to that idea, it's like a social platform. It's more of an informal platform. People check it, they have a scroll through, who shared what articles do I want to click on, who am I kind of like messaging or maybe chatting to on LinkedIn. Whereas once you get over that into the email, that's where like you're down to business, so to speak. You're like, you're getting that meeting booked in, you're scheduling appointments. So it's good to really make that move as soon as possible. And then you kind of know that you've got that step kind of one further. So you've taken it from your social platform and you're kind of into that more like formal channel where it's probably going to stick. And the emails are going to land and be read more often than sometimes from LinkedIn messages.
Interesting. Well, I hope you guys have taken notes on some of those new things that we found are working right now. And as for other things that we're finding work best right now, optimizing your LinkedIn profile is something we found to be really key, especially when it comes down to that social selling piece that we've been talking about. And so right now, I would love for any of you guys, if you would like us to take a look at your LinkedIn profile, shoot the link into those YouTube comments there, and we'll have a look at your profile live. We promise we won't be mean, but we'll take a look at all the aspects that go into essentially optimizing your LinkedIn profile. so that it doesn't read as a resume, but rather a case study for your business. So yeah, we'll give a couple of minutes for you guys. Well, no, you can send them the whole time that we're talking about this particular topic. We'll dig into a little bit of what we mean, and then hopefully some of you guys will send some over and we can do a little bit of a live audit and screen share.
Yeah, definitely. I think because this is a huge one as well. Sort of when looking at a new channel, you kind of like take your assumptions and kind of approach to maybe other channels over there, just because it's natural. So like with email, you know, like the key things you focus on is like your list building, like rightly so, your messaging, rightly so. Then when you go into a new channel, there are so many different aspects that haven't always been kind of thought about before. So like LinkedIn profile is a perfect one, because I obviously in email, it's not something you need to worry about as much because you're going through a completely different channel. You don't have like an email profile that you have to worry about too. But on LinkedIn, it's like a huge opportunity to gain way more credibility with the prospect when you're reaching out. So it's almost the initial, okay, I've put in a really captivating kind of connection message. They're interested. What are you probably going to do if you haven't heard of this person or don't recognize the name? I'm probably going to go and check out their profile. And then if I look at their profile and they maybe have a couple of job postings, you know, their school and where they live, it doesn't really tell me that much. Like I'm not necessarily going to come away with a negative view, but I'm also not going to come away informed or kind of motivated to speak to someone or like have my interest piqued. But yeah, having that business case study in there, it gives me an idea. Like also it's I'm not looking for a resume. Like if I'm a prospect and I've like had a look at interest, it's like, sure, you have a fantastic background and education, but that's kind of not what I'm going to be looking for. What I'm going to be looking for is kind of, why is your role right now something that's going to kind of be relevant to me, and how are you guys going to help me? So yeah, exactly. It's getting in there with that kind of like the case study and using that bio in a really effective way, and kind of like having a headline. That's a really good one as well. Rather than in your LinkedIn headline, don't use your actual role, because also, as we know these days, like roles and titles like vary so much, right? Like even standard roles like an SDR, an AE, or an account manager, like really like fundamental roles, just because of the name, like responsibilities and what someone does can like completely like vary from company to company. So instead of having your role in there, have like a really pithy statement of like what your company does. So I think Colin Stewart, CEO, his tagline is, "We help companies build outbound sales teams." Like something really pithy. It's like, oh right, like I know immediately from reading that like what you do. And that's also great because then when you're sending these connection requests and like building your network, even if people don't always respond to your messages but they're accepting, like building their network, anything you share is going to come up on their like page. Having that pithy thing, if they're like, oh, who's that person? Oh, they have built outbound sales teams. And then it's going to like keep you relevant, right? It's going to keep you there. So yeah, there are lots of little things you can do like that to make sure that you're always top of people's mind to like stand out.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So we've got a couple of questions that have been coming in. We'll take this time to tackle some of those questions so that we can give you guys time to send us your links to your LinkedIn profile. And if not, we're just going to have to look at mine, and
which
who
I'm
knows
sure
if I'm doing it right. Okay, we'll use that as our fallback plan. But we have a question from Sandra Kirby. She's asking, am I trying to connect with potential customers and I am trying to connect with potential customers and I am trying what verbiage to use? I'm a little bit confused by that question. Okay, I'm trying to connect with potential customers and I'm like, Sandra, maybe go ahead, Lavinia, if you have an idea.
Sorry, no, is this what kind of example of connection messages to use? Is that Sandra what you're asking?
Yeah, maybe Sandra, you can just give us a little extra context there. Are you wondering which customers and what verbiage? She's trying to figure out which customers and which verbiage. So it sounds like trying to use LinkedIn to figure out what particular wording to use for what particular audience. I think we'll get a confirmation that is correct in a second here. So trying to figure out what wording to use over LinkedIn in the connection request message, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, perfect. So I think this is a really key one. And in the spirit of outbound labs and testing, I think this is something that you've got to like test hypotheses to really get to the bottom of. I think they're a really great way to approach it is kind of like come up with hypotheses and different ideas. So I'm sure you have a different idea of a couple of ideas. God, I keep repeating myself. I'm trying a couple of ideas of what could work with certain segments. So a really good way to break it out is first think of like each of the type of personas and characteristics of companies you're reaching out to. Almost like, get up a spreadsheet, break it down and be like, so I have A persona, I have B persona, I have C persona. Like these are the people I want to talk to. And then go like into your hypotheses, like what do I think is going to work? I think X style of message or X keyword is going to work, but then I also think B may work, and then kind of break it down for each of them. So yeah, almost have that in a spreadsheet and break it down, who you want to talk to, the different ideas, what you want to say there, and then kind of test. Like I think that's really what we've got to do is send out those A/B tests, compare them side by side, kind of review it. I would say after a couple of weeks, maybe a month, and just see where the trends are going. Because I think really early on, you'll get some really like strong indicators. What is the best kind of language to use and what the best keywords is. And then the beauty of that, you can then take it further and refine it again. It's like, oh, so my initial idea didn't work, but my second, or maybe this will work, that worked really well. But now how can I refine that even more? And maybe there's an option there. So I think it's the beauty of A/B testing. But yeah, kind of like get that spreadsheet out, break down who you're talking to, all the different options of the message you're going to say, and like test it. Honestly, that's going to be like your hard and fast way to get the data to really know where you're going to get the best results. And there's a good analogy that is used kind of internally, and I know a previous our old CTO, kind of Kenny used it a lot, and it's the idea of kind of like mining. It's like when they're building mines, they don't kind of like go all in, like build the full mine and go everything as soon as they get like one tiny bit of information. They do like lots of tests and drilling initially to find out where they want to like dig their mine. And I think that's what we've got to do in when you're testing kind of messaging and personas as well. You've got to do like lots of small tests and see where you kind of like hit gold, so to speak. And that's when you're like, okay, this is where all my focus is going to be. And then keep that turning over and keep that testing.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sandra, you mentioned you sent 20, I'm not sure if this is connection requests with a message or just messages in general, and one replied. That's actually not a bad reply rate when it comes to outbound. That's actually really good. That's 5%. You're not doing anything wrong, basically, if those are the kinds of numbers that you're seeing. Like with email, you aren't guaranteed to get very consistent replies. Even if you really nail it, I'd say that really, really personalized approach where you take a look at somebody's like LinkedIn profile, see if they have any self-authored content, see what they're engaging with, and then maybe refer really specifically to something like that would increase potentially that response rate, but still a 5% response rate is really good. And yeah, so the ultra specificity of the really researched outreach, I think will help. And then making sure, as Lavinia mentioned, with the breaking down who exactly you're targeting with each one of these messages, trying out a different message for, like, I don't know, if you target like technical IT data personas for your company, you know that there's like the CTO, the CIO, there's like project managers, there's all these different types of technical personas that can be on the buying committee, can be influencers, whatever. Try very specific messaging for each one of those specific personas. But honestly, Sandra, that's not a bad connection or response rate anyway. So you're certainly on the right track. Dan Freeman wants us to talk a little bit more about our ICP plans, key targeting criteria, and list building solutions that we use on LinkedIn.
Yeah, sure thing. So so to kind of start with the ICP plans a bit, I think that's something that is kind of standard, whether kind of whatever channel we're working in, really. I think that's a consistent, and that's like your core bit of outbound. So I think it also is really relevant to that idea of making sure your list building is really on point as well. And it's like someone said, we've all experienced, like the sales nav list building. You think you're kind of like going to get your standard ICP out, you go and check that list, and there are some like serious wildcards in there. So it's really making sure that you stay true to that ICP, tried and tested. If you're still working out your ICP, similar to what we were saying to Sandra as well, kind of test it, break down like hypotheses of who you think your ICP could be, and then really mix it up and get those experiments running, get it out there, get it testing. So key targeting criteria specifically, how we break it down, I think it really depends on the company itself, and also I think kind of your product complexity as well. So I think that's going to have a big difference of like how refined you need to be with your targeting. So a good example, I'm just going to think of something off the top of my head, so this could be really rogue, so bear with me. For like a B2C example, could be something like Instagram. Like when it comes to product complexity, it's pretty straightforward. It's kind of like a photo sharing app where you connect with friends and brands and you can stay up to date. So that's pretty broad. As we know, there's like a big age group, big demographic that can be targeted by that. So when it comes to like key targeting criteria, you can keep it pretty high level, kind of like age. Are they an active social media user elsewhere, for example, on Facebook? Whereabouts in the world are they? There's some like really high level. But if we look at think of something a lot more specific, it could be something kind of in the B2B world. It could be a product that is helping me identify potential issues within my manufacturing plant that's like abroad. Obviously that's going to be like way more specific targeting criteria. And you're going to have like where there's a bit more product complexity there when it comes to like what you're selling and kind of like where exactly your value prop is. So I think it really depends on that kind of how specific do you need to be. And also sometimes it could be key targeting criteria based on the messaging as well, because you can like break it down so X pool of personas could be a really good customer for you, and so could Y, but you use different criteria and then also different messages for them to like funnel them in as well. So I think that's, again, keep saying it, but kind of like, yeah, test it out. If you're unsure, kind of go like more high level if you want to see like what kind of results that produces in this, get a bit more specific and see kind of what volume of prospects that brings up to you. And then finally here, list building solutions. So like Zoom info is a strong one. I know it's like popular out there. Some methods like are a bit more manual but work really well, is like especially if you're looking for a lot more like specific companies, just doing like basic Google searches and being like clever about your keyword searches. So like top X companies in X industry in the last year, or really prominent like media brands or consulting brands. And that's also a really good thing to riff off in your messaging. You say, oh, I can see that you were named by X publication as a top 20 company in this area. So it's definitely a bit more manual, but like to Sarah's point, saying just getting like more hyper personalized, and that's the way to go. I think there are no cheats, there are no shortcuts. Trying to shortcut here is just it's gonna have a massive impact on your results. But like spending a bit more time and testing, and also it's not always going to be 100% guaranteed to work right. This is also something how we have to be like agile, that like buzzword, and keep trying something new or a different approach, or like how am I going to find this company? Or you can even work backwards, like if you're taking more of an ABM approach and like looking at a specific company, you can try and see, have they been named in any awards, any lists, and then look at other companies that are also on that list and see if they're relevant. So there are a couple of different ways, just a bit of like, yeah, getting creative, I think.
Definitely. Thank you for answering that, Lavinia. We've got another question here from Zachary Barber asking, best practices for meetings with people you're already connected with, but who you may not know personally. So how do you ask for meetings with people that you are already connected with, but you may not know personally?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think that's super brilliant, because when you're running campaigns, you're saying lots of people will connect, but they don't always respond to your initial message. But you have them there as a connection, and it's a great network to build out. I would say check back to the source, like why were you connected in the first place? Can you see, was there some like initial conversation, like what connections do you have in common? Kind of look back for that and like try and reference that. If it's not clear, you can always go and like look at articles they've been sharing, understand a bit more about their activity, or you can even straight in and go like, oh, I've been following some of the content you've been sharing, if they've been sharing content, and I noticed that X company, your company, has made this change, or there's been this like trigger. I'd love to chat a bit about this change. Obviously, that's very dependent. That's like conditional on these external events happening that you don't have control over. If they haven't happened and it's kind of just like cold, they haven't really had much activity on LinkedIn, nothing really relevant is like sparked up, like timely, that's going to really help you like construct that connection message. I would just go for like that super conversational, and also like that honest tone, like, hey, I noticed we're connected. I feel like there could be some relevance we could add to each other. I'd love to speak. I noticed we've been connected for a while. We haven't actually spoken yet. And then kind of use your standard messaging and kind of your opening gambit that you would in other around. I think that's crucial as well. The old bait and switch, people are so conscious of it. You don't want to try and get in there too off piece, kind of just be honest, like, we've been connected, I'd love to have a chat, and just be honest. And as we always say, like, if it's relevant and timely to the prospect and you've got your like targeting right, then you're going to be great. Even if it's a no, they'll be more inclined to respond, and then B, like, give you a reason for the objection as well. I think that's something haven't mentioned yet, but is always really important, is even if it's not a positive response, having someone being willing to give you like data around why not is like just as valuable as well. And also it shows that the trust is there. There may be other things that are out of their control that mean it's not a good time for them to be buying or looking into new solutions or whatever it is. But the fact that trust is there, that they're like, sure, not now because of XYZ, I'm transitioning out, we've got lots of internal change, that's also like just as useful information.
For sure. Okay, another question from Caesar Cruz. Is it possible to do LinkedIn outreach at scale? Is it worth it for SDRs?
I just read the extra bit of that question. That wasn't funny. The extra bit was like, love how I say scheduling.
Yeah.
Is it possible to do LinkedIn outreach at scale? Yes. Is it worth it for SDRs? Less and less so, honestly. It comes back to what we were saying about the saturation. I think now everywhere, just like exactly the same with email, prospects can spot heavy automation a mile off, and it never goes down well. Like, even if you have a great list and great targeting, it's just going to like completely stand out, and you could like lose a chance of a meeting just because someone takes an objection to the fact that it's clearly an automated message. It's also like with everything in outbound as well, it's like when you're dealing with people, like, people are unpredictable. Like, not only like personalities vary so much, but also are you getting someone on a good day, a bad day? You know what, if someone's on a good day and they're feeling open and they've got some spare time and they're going through their LinkedIn, they could see an automated message and they'll reach back out with maybe another question. Yeah, you could be fine. But more often than not, I'd say you're definitely going to be getting more value out of being like super personalized and super targeted. It doesn't always mean tailoring one-on-one LinkedIn messages. It could mean just having like really concise lists, though. We're talking like 50, and like making sure that message is really tailored to those people on that list. So how we're talking about earlier, like second and third degree connections. So what would have traditionally been like a larger list, then break it further down into like secondary degree connections. And then even from secondary degree connections, you can even break it further down into like location, even by like city, town, state. And that means that you can make a more personalized message, but you're still getting a bit more volume there. But I'd say definitely, be careful with the high volume stuff, because I think that's definitely, as we've seen, hugely decreased in effectiveness. So I'd go focus on the time, like Sandra was saying, sounds like she builds cracking this one response on 20 messages, like go down that route, look for really getting it like spot on. Absolutely.
Definitely. And there's another question that's sort of in the same vein, so I'll tackle that now as well. Felipe is asking, he's from Brazil. He has a question about these approaches. At the beginning, they were using robots to make these connections, and the text's ready for all invitees. Is that recommended? So that kind of falls under the same scope of what we were talking about there. And you can use an automation tool if that will help you, but you have to be aware of the fact that LinkedIn doesn't want you to use an automation tool. Yeah. So LinkedIn is going to do its best to prevent you from using said automation tool. The way that it's doing it to date is by kind of monitoring the number of connection requests that you're sending out. And there is a daily cap. I think that cap even sometimes moves. It's not clear exactly when you get flagged. I've even been flagged once for manual connection requests just because I sent out too many in one day, and LinkedIn was like, no, you've hit your max. Be careful with that activity because you might, like, you're on thin ice basically. And if you do get flagged by LinkedIn as spam, it's not like an email domain where you can create a new one. Your whole LinkedIn profile will be suspended, and you really don't want that to happen. So be super careful with those bots that are basically sending out the automated LinkedIn stuff. You're probably better off doing it manually. If you are going to use an automation tool, make sure you keep that number of initials going out or number of messages going out at a really, really low threshold, like between 25 and 50 a day is probably, yeah, definitely 50 would probably be the top end of where you want to go there. Felipe?
Yeah, and I'd also say, like, yeah, to that point as well, you want to be checking your pending invites as well. You never want that to get too high as well. So again, like if you are using a bot and you're kind of just like sending out lots of messages, like those pending invites are going to build up like before you know it. And that's something you want to like monitor as well, because again, that's another like clear sign to LinkedIn that you are using a bot. Like not only are you sending out so many connection requests a day, you have like something ridiculous like 90 people you send a request to aren't accepting. So that's another really clear thing. And equally as well, yeah, your LinkedIn's going to try its best to stop you and shut you down. And like once it's flagged you once, you're going to be kind of like on the list of ones to watch. You wouldn't want your LinkedIn account kind of getting shut down or suspended for however long it was. But equally as well, when it comes to results, even if you do get through to some people, it's like it's not going to yield the kind of meetings or the quality of meetings as well that you want to be getting to. So yeah, it's definitely twofold. Again, this feels like so reminiscent of email as well, and like spam and deliverability. It's like the platform's going to try and stop you, and even if you do get through, like the method isn't like prospects are going to not take kindly to it as well. So yeah, there are lots of, it's like a multi-layered approach.
Definitely. We've got another question here from Nami. I'm going to say Kadam Hosseini. That's
nice.
Oh, my dog is barking. Okay, so she asks, or they ask, what is the best opening statement / hook to send message for the first time for the best chance of engagement?
That is the $1 million question. $1 million question. I would say I'm reticent to say there's like one specific message, because when, depending on who you're talking to, the kind of company you're kind of sending that message from, like your value prop, your solution, like there are so many different things, and it's definitely not like a one size fits all. I think the best way, best kind of principles to keep in mind is like, remember it's a social platform, like be social, be conversational. You're not making a formal pitch. You're not like writing a formal piece of writing. It doesn't need to look like an essay opener or even a formal email. Like keep it conversational, keep it social, and then test. Like Nami, I'm sure you have a couple of ideas that you're playing with in your head, you know, like get them out there, start testing with them, kind of test them alongside each other, see what starts to get traction, and then kind of focus in on that, kind of refine that, and then maybe test that a bit more. Yeah, I really can't emphasize enough, like testing is the way to go. I think it's this like amazing framework and tool that we can keep using to make sure we're keeping up with like the change, and as we're saying, like different channels, even multi-channel, like everything is always developing, and like you have to be dynamic and able to keep up, and having like a one there's no like silver bullet. Like it's definitely a lead bullet world, but having that framework and like properly testing It's something that you can keep using time and time again to keep up with like what is working and what's going to be most effective. And like, yeah, this is a perfect example of like the experiments we did last year. Worked great results at the time, really guided our strategy. Now we've completely changed how we're approaching things, but we're still using that like experimental framework and testing. So you just got to be constantly testing. So yeah, that would be my advice. Like, keep it conversational, keep it social, and relevant, and then test. Just like test, see what you've got, get your hypotheses out there, get it on paper, send it out. That's really the best way to find out what's going to work best for you.
Nice. Okay, we'll come back to a few more of these questions after we talk some more about the optimization of the LinkedIn profile. I don't think any of you have shared your profiles with us, and that's okay. We'll use mine as an example, and you can just follow along and take some notes. So I'm going to screen share now to my LinkedIn profile right here. Can you see? Nope, this is our wrong one. That is notes for what we're talking about right now. Okay, wait, let me make sure that I have it. Okay, this should work. Screen share, LinkedIn, go. Can you see my LinkedIn profile?
Yeah, cool, perfect.
Okay, this is me. Let's nitpick, or at least like point out the things that you should worry about when optimizing one's LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, then we can start with like the banner, the like grow faster with outbound sales development. I think that came back to what we're saying about using like that headline of the banner. Like, it's immediately obvious what predictable revenue does. This is kudos to our fantastic marketing team who gave the team a range of colors to choose from. So you choose your favorite colors to have on there. So yeah, that's really great. But I think something to focus on here, and it's the same principle, like the most prominent feature isn't the name of the company. Unless it's a really recognizable brand. We're talking like your Microsoft, Google, like something that people know straight away. Like, okay, great, your company name is going to be relevant to me once we have a relationship and engagement. But right now, as a new prospect, like the first time I come across your company, like, what do you do? What do you offer me? And like having that like right there, front and center, I'm going to click on Sarah's profile and be like, okay, I get it. Grow faster with outbound sales development. I get why you're trying to help me, and I get how you're going to do it. So that's really key. Then we have, I think, the 500 plus connections. That's always a good sign as well. It shows that you haven't just like spun up your LinkedIn profile like a week ago and now you're suddenly starting to prospect from it. Right. Something to really do, like establish your network, get some activity, kind of engage with your network on posts they're sharing. And yeah, get some, like, have some character as well, because it's meant to reflect you as a person, which is obviously what you are. So yeah, that's great to see. I'd be like, yeah, perfect.
Mm-hmm.
About. Nice, lovely little pithy sentence. I wonder if we could like add more, maybe like case study stuff in there, something that's like a bit more about
like tangible things that we've done for companies in this way. Interesting.
Yeah, and a bit more about I think it almost like how we write case studies is like having that story. So almost like setting the scene of like how companies exist, like what world they exist in, like before they engage with predictable revenue. So maybe they don't have the time or expertise, resources, whatever that may be, to like approach outbound. And it's always been something they've wanted to do and they've never been able to do, or no one's ever prioritized. They don't have the right time. So like thinking about that kind of problem space, and then moving into like what happens with the engagement with predictable revenue and some kind of reference examples, reference customers, giving a bit of an idea of kind of like the before and after, and kind of like, you know, the Holy Land, what happens next after working with PR and getting there, because that's also a good one, a good area as well, the about, to give an idea of like what the company does, and also like how you fit in personally as well, because obviously again referencing from a personal profile, so we've got to keep that personality element in there.
Okay, awesome. And then this is just my stuff. I guess activity is the other thing that we're concerned about.
Yeah, activity. Like, I love that you have so much activity. and banging loads of followers as well. Again, it's like all these signs as well, like just goes to show you're kind of like working the network, you're engaging with your network, sharing valuable information, seeing that I can see you've like commented, you've shared, like, and also relevant stuff as well to predictable revenue. So if I was a prospect, I'd go in and I'd kind of like start poking around, like look at a live stream, I'd look at like the podcasts you've hosted, and or different content from other individuals kind of who are working in the same area, and like I'd get some like serious value out of that. And also I'd be like, oh, Sarah knows what she's talking about, like she knows her stuff. So I think making sure that you're engaging with that sharing activity and content. And I think something that's key as well is like it doesn't not just your own content, it's like it can be other people's content as well. In fact, like sometimes that's almost better when it comes to sharing other people's content, and just being really engaged. And there's some great methods of asking people for like their opinion, or like, you know, everyone loves a bit of like a controversial topic as well, kind of like put something out there. And again, it's kind of the idea is like you don't have to be controversial. You can say like, oh, in outbound sales, I think LinkedIn is already dead. I've heard this this is what some people are saying. What do you guys think? What's your experience? Then kind of like get people engaging. I think that's always really a really good like method to take, and yeah, get all that activity up.
Cool. Any other places on the profile that we should be paying attention to?
I think making sure some like basic stuff as well, like making sure you have a profile picture. I think that's something there. I think there are definitely like red flags when it comes to profiles. Like if you look on, they don't have a picture. The only role that they have on their LinkedIn is the company that they're prospecting from. I think like build it out, make sure you've got some like other history, or even kind of like education. Yeah, I love the fact you have links in there as well, because it's like rather than you're telling me, like you're showing me, which makes it way more relevant. It's something I can go and like dig into. I think also like any accolades or anything that like you or your company has, like definitely include them and like make them prominent here as well. I think that's also something that's like eye-catching and making you stand out.
So you'd put that in like the description, because it allows you to, you know, edit a description for each of your roles. That's where you'd put that, the accolades, that kind of info?
I would put, so depending on the accolade, I might even put it in a headline. So we're talking about, instead of putting a role in there, so I don't know, example could be like an accolade, it could either be company or personal. So it could be like Sarah Jane Hicks named #1 SDR in like North America in 2019, or just something that like stands out there that's really like, oh god, this is good. Or there can be or like predictable revenue, named like fastest growing SDR as a service company in X years. So something that's really been like an accolade, but that you want to get that front and center. So I think if you have that accolade, like your headline is the way to go. And then I was saying before as well, this means as you are doing all that engagement on like your homepage and commenting on other people's posts and sharing everything or liking something, when that pops up on someone else's LinkedIn, they're still going to see that headline. So again, it's just kind of like going to jog their memory and kind of capture their attention.
Cool. I'll stop my share here, and we can move on to the next little topic. So what were we going to chat about next? Let me pull up my notes again. Yes. So now we're going to talk about messaging. So messaging in LinkedIn. We kind of tackled a little bit of this on last week's PredRev Live. And again, it's something that we're going to tackle in really great detail on the super stream. So if you don't get your example covered today, chances are we'll have time to do it next week when we tackle that. But yeah, Lavinia, give us a taste of kind of how messaging works on LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a few points we've already touched on when it comes to kind of methods and tactics we can use now. So there's the just being a lot more sensitive around like current climate and specific demographics. That's something to kind of like weave into your messaging. And again, it like touches on that like more personalized style. So trying to do that as much as possible. Kind kind of tailoring the message depending on whether they're an existing connection, a secondary or third degree connection. That's something specifically too. But there are some other areas that we've changed. So for example, sending out follow-up messages the following business day from when someone connected. We for the longest time we would do kind of like a couple of hours after someone connected, because we had the idea, we're like, okay, right, you know, it's relevant, it's top of mind, they've just been on, they've just accepted, there must be something there. And so then we'd like send out a message. But then we're like, if we look at it in more of like a human style, like if I sent a connection message to someone, I'm probably not going to then follow up like an hour later. I mean, some SDRs, you know, if you're working those prospects and going on it, like that's the focus, that's what you want to do, you want to get it. But we actually found that leaving it till the following business day actually improved the response rate and the engagement. So I know as well, it's like tempting to then you've got the response and you know they've accepted, like you want to send that follow up straight away. We found that actually waiting to next business day is like a better approach. Again, it keeps it like more social, a bit more relaxed, I think, is like almost kind of like the key here. It's a bit more like human. Something as well is keeping the CTAs social and conversational as well. So like we were saying as well, like the tangible results before, and kind of putting in those metrics. Equally, we don't want to be going straight in a connection request, or even like in the first follow-up being like, when works for a call, do you want to get on a call? Like going straight into that, it's kind of like going the more kind of like direct feedback route. And I think this is something that plays into the comment about kind of be honest with the prospect as well. Like I'm not trying to deceive you or like bait and switch or anything. Like, look, I did X research. I think we could help out for XYZ reason. Have I got this right? Is this the right time to be reaching out? Kind of keep it honest. And then even if it is no, this isn't the right time, it's not relevant, and then people are probably going to appreciate the fact that you checked before kind of assuming they were right for a call. And equally as well, this is something as well that lends itself to the more targeted lists rather than kind of like, you know, that higher volume. You can really like identify the reason and say, look, I'm a salesperson, you have salespeople in your company, and like you get it, this is part of my job, but I want to check, I don't want to pester you, I don't want to be sending you a message if this isn't the right time. And a lot of the time there are those criteria that you can't always get information to understand whether they are a good fit. So that's a good CTA to ask as well. It's like, XYZ kind of like fit the parameters, so I think we could help you out here, or this is relevant. However, I wasn't sure if this was a project you've already wrapped up or you're embarking on in the new year. Would be great to understand like where you're at the moment. So just things like that with your C2As. Keep it more in line with like the fact it's a social platform, and also just keeps it feeling a bit more personalized. And that you've actually like taken the time to like reach out.
Cool.
Skimming through my notes here to see which other bits about the messaging we haven't been over yet. Something we've also actually found works. You have to be careful with the persona and like be conscious of who you're reaching out to. It's like gifs and memes. Obviously, like on email, it's a big no-no because of like spam filters. Like you're basically just you're sending your email into the ether, like, and no one's ever going to see it if you put in a gif or a meme. But on LinkedIn, be conscious with your choice and like who you're sending it to. Obviously, you don't go and send it to like CTOs of enterprise companies. While I'm sure there are some out there who would appreciate it, you know, on the whole, probably not the persona that it would like resonate with. But if you feel like that is something that could resonate with the audience, or like a specific persona you're reaching out to, like, yeah, definitely like give it a go. That's something that I think is good about LinkedIn. You can add a bit more kind of color, and you can add in links, and you can add in GIFs and photos without that concern that comes with email and like hitting spam filters. So yeah, definitely try that out.
Interesting. And anything that you found kind of to do with the current economic climate and any kind of impacts there around messaging? Because I know that we found there was like the post COVID messaging where everyone was like the new normal, everything that's going on currently in the world. And that ended up being something that people got sick of so quickly on email. And then that brought down response rates and open rates. Like if you mentioned COVID in the headline, or if you mentioned the new normal or COVID in the body of the email. Did you find a similar trend with LinkedIn?
There was definitely a similar trend when it came to like referencing COVID. I think it's the idea that very quickly everyone's like, we know. Unfortunately, we know. We can't not be aware of it. So it's that kind of thing. But I think I think a really like super topical is obviously the election, if prospecting into the US as well. Kind of at the moment, our team with our clients are being like super sensitive as to like what they're saying to who and where they're based. And also what kind of company they are, like also prospecting into like the UK. So England's just gone down into another lockdown, so obviously lots of non-essential businesses have had to close. So that's another area where you just have to be like super sensitive of like what experience that's like out of all of our hands, what like external factors are really shaping the experience for this business and this individual at the moment as well. I think that's something that just have to be like so hyper aware of and so conscious of kind of what's going on there, because you just have to, again, it comes back to like proving to the prospect. Again, I feel like these are principles that are relevant all the time, but it's like how we apply them is like, it's like having that framework, but it's like showing to the prospect that you're being conscientious in your outreach, and not giving them any reason to assume that you've just built a list and you've let it run and it's been there for a month and you're kind of like just hoping for the best, showing that that's not the case. And just really tapping in, and also again, it comes down to the person and personalities and whether they're having a good or a bad day. And you can do everything in your power and you can have the best will, but some people are going to take offense to things, or it's not going to be a right time, or there's going to be some other kind of trigger. Like, it's going to happen, but I think it's how often it happens. And like, if you like take a step back and think like, okay, did I do all my research before I sent this message? Should I have maybe turned this campaign off, or maybe changed the messaging last week in sight of the election coming up this week or lockdown happening? I think it's just thinking and taking a step back. And if you can like happily say, yeah, I did. I was conscious of everything that I could have been. And like, people are people at the end of the day. That's who we're reaching out to. We can't help that. But like, obviously, if it's happening more often than not, then like need to change something, go back and like have a look at something.
Cool. Before we tackle our last two topics around LinkedIn for the day, we did get a couple of LinkedIn profiles. So let's do an audit of one of those right now. Let me make sure I have it pulled up so that the screen share is what we want to see. Yep, I do. Okay. All right. Can we see Vlad?
Absolutely.
Cool.
Thanks, Vlad.
Let's get to it.
Nice. So very similar to Sarah's, keep your remote team safe. Like it, like straight up there. You've got the headline there. You've got the picture there. Again, lots of connections. I like the fact also here you can see there's like 7 mutual connections. That's also something that's going to really kind of be like, okay, so there are other people I know who know this guy too. So like that, they're like, and that comes to as well, like building out your network in the space where you're going to have lots of potential customers. Because if it's like, you're completely removed, obviously it's going to be a lot more difficult to get through to someone where you have like no mutual connections. So yeah, like it, you've clearly like been building out your network and working on LinkedIn. You've got also, I can see you have LinkedIn Premium as well. That's always like good to see as well. Just gives a bit more gravitas. Here. Having a quick read over. Teams are slightly good. So nice. So I'd say, so this is a good like elevator pitch. Like the question I would have here, Vlad, is like, is this kind of a brief overview that I could see if I went to like your website or like even your company page on LinkedIn? I wonder if here there's something that you could tailor this so it read a bit more informally, and like we're saying, like a case study, kind of gave a bit more of an idea, almost like informal, almost like a bit more like conversational speak. So rather than being like, we do this for these people, kind of like lighten it up a bit. And then I like the fact at the end that you have that CTA, like, I think we should work together, like I'd love to hear from you. Again, it's kind of like putting the ball in their court. It's not being like, call me, let's have a meeting, let's do this, let's go. It's like, interested, want to find out more. And having your email there and phone is like, I love that, like super direct. You're like giving them lots of options for how they can reach out to you and like letting them preference it. But yeah, I think the about text, kind of like lightening that up and making it like almost a bit like softer and kind of like case study-esque, telling like that storytelling and getting that thread through, kind of like what happens to companies before, kind of where is that pain point. Because then I think if you put in that like the before element of the story, that's the bit where you can start to try and like resonate with potential prospects. If they go onto your thing and they're like, oh, this feels familiar, oh, I know that pain, I have that pain, then I'm going to be like more likely to keep reading. So I think, yeah, that's a really good, like lengthwise though, I think it's perfect. Yeah, get the case study vibe in there. I think that could be a good kind of like elevation. Activity, great, love it. 1,500 followers, tells me you're legit, not a bot. Like it. An experience, yeah, love it. Good. Yeah, I think it would be that key, that about. And also you've got the tagline, helping companies achieve advanced online security and privacy. Nice, Fad, I like it. You've been working hard on that profile.
Nice. And then we have one more here.
Nice. So having looked through, Sandra, so I would say like it again, like you've got a photo in there, you've got like a profile picture, you've got a header, like a background, so it's not just like blank, no images. I'd see if, like we're saying with the other two, you could add in a just like a really brief value prop, like super pithy statement, 7 words of what Osborne Coinage does. Like, what's your value prop? Like, what do you help companies with? Because then I can come straight in, rather I kind of like skim around, see what's going on, kind of like try to work it out. I get that, like that hits me in the face is the first thing, like, okay, this is what this company does, this is why this person has reached out to me. I know that about, I sell coins. I caught your attention. I love that, like straight to the point. Super pithy. I sell coins. I caught your attention for some reason. I'm too, like, I think that's, I like the fact that it's like chill, super conversational. Like it's not a bit just like, this is what I do, this is how I do it, do you want to find out more? I reckon you could like flesh it out a bit more, and you could even I don't know, for example, kind of what kind of coins, how does that work, who normally like comes to you, kind of what are examples of clients, so what kind of examples of like fundraising events, or how have you fitted in there, kind of stories of like anniversaries, yeah, you could play on that one. Yeah, lots of different elements there, you could like beef it out a bit. This is a good example of how I was saying earlier, kind of like a complex, how kind of like complex is your product. Like this is good because it's like straightforward what you do, and you have like loads of subsections, so you can really kind of focus in on like, you like coins, this is how I sell them, and these are the kind of like the ways that I do it, and kind of then like break that down into your different audiences. So like it. And again, activity, everyone we looked at has great activity. It's such a good point there. And also, in fact, on the activity side as well, a way to really bump it is to when you're going for the engagement, as I was saying before, kind of getting like asking questions or like increasing the conversation. So I know it's really good to engage and kind of like posts, save posts, or kind of even just kind of like comment and like feedback. But look at how you can then like further that engagement, like ask a question to the original poster, or if it's a post you've shared, kind of follow up if someone comments on it, kind of ask for their opinion or something, or what they thought about it, or what's their opinion on the topic, just to keep that going as well. That's a good way to like take it to the next level.
Cool. And then we've got the multiple jobs, so we know she's not a bot. She's been doing her thing for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Thank you for sharing those, you guys. That's awesome. And let's move on to our penultimate topic for this PredRev Live, which is around lists. So we tackled a little bit of that when we were talking about LinkedIn as a channel and kind of how you build your lists and some of the key criteria. But let's talk about, segmenting the lists and recycling lists.
Yeah, so these are two, this is kind of building on that initial method of like how we build lists and the best way to go about it. So something we found recently, a good way to make sure you're like making the most of the prospects that come up in all the lists you build, is to recycle some of those lists, because you can actually only prospect to third degree connections tops. So anyone beyond third degree, even if they're on your list, you won't be able to prospect to them. But as we were saying, like the beauty of like building your network and getting your name out there and engaging with people is you're going to grow your network. Therefore, your third degree connections are going to also grow. So with some of those lists, keep recycling them like every few months. See if there are prospects on there that you weren't able to connect with previously that you could do now. So that's a good way to make sure you're like using the list and make sure you're not missing anyone out. And as we were saying, when you're putting the hard work into the list building, you want the results to come and kind of like justify that work you put into it, because it's not a secret. Like building smaller and more refined lists, it is hard work, it takes more time, it takes more thought, but it will be reflected in the results. And when you have that, you don't want, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 people on those lists. You can't reach out to them because they're third connections. So like keep recycling, make sure you get the most out of your hard work of building that list. So that's number one. And then second, really is like, touch on this so much, but I don't think I can emphasize enough like how important it's become to like segment out your lists. So even if you're reaching out to your ICP, so even like segment it further than your ICP. So your ICP could, for example, be like retailers with more than 10 locations and an e-commerce presence. So that's kind of your ICP. I'm sure it'll probably be more refined than that. But then segment it out further than that. So there are obviously ways of doing it like via persona. There could be ways of doing it by who does the retailer target themselves, like who are they trying to sell their product to. That's another way you could like further segment down like who you're targeting again. So really try and like narrow it down as much as you can, again, to make sure that you're like making the messages specific as possible, but also keeping up that volume. You don't want to be doing like always completely ABM. Like some outbound approaches like lend itself to ABM. Some you can kind of like get those small segmentation. So look at how you can really focus on finding the most relevant things for those like smaller segments like within your ICP.
Nice. And finally, we wanted to touch on using LinkedIn within multi-channel sequences. And this is actually something, Dan, you had a question a little bit earlier that this is kind of going to touch on. Your question was around, do you switch the communication channel from Sales Nav after a few touches to emailing the tangible results message, or do you stay on Sales Nav throughout your lifecycle cadence? Let's talk about some multi-channel sequences.
Yeah, absolutely. So then to answer your question, I think once you have a response during a conversation, I would try and move it to email like as soon as possible, especially if that more formal, like scheduling a time, booking a meeting, sharing case studies, white papers, whatever it is. I would try and like hotfoot it over to email, just because it's more likely to land. Often we found as well with Sales Nav inboxes versus like normal LinkedIn inboxes, the messages can sometimes switch depending on LinkedIn when they change their UI, like where messages land. And sometimes depending on whether the individual has Sales Nav as well themselves, or like say LinkedIn Premium, where the messages can get lost. And obviously that's not ideal if you're like starting a conversation in Sales Nav and then it goes to a different inbox and everything. Yeah, less than ideal. So I would say like, as soon as you can, kind of like jump over to email. There are some other elements that we've been trying out with the multi-channel as well, and this is all stuff we're still kind of currently testing, but hopefully it gives you some ideas on how you can try it. Is look at different times to like view a profile. So for example, like in your sequence, if you start with an email, then you send a LinkedIn and you have a call, or you email, call email, whichever way around it is, kind of think like, where could I add in like a LinkedIn profile view? Like, how can I try and like get that thread between the different channels to my prospect? So if I call them, hop on their LinkedIn, have a look at their LinkedIn, kind of, you can play around with that a bit so you can see how that would affect it. And then also another one is like actively mentioning that you've reached out on other channels when you're connecting on LinkedIn. So for example, if you've tried to call them and haven't got through, had to leave a message, or you've popped them an email, connect with them on LinkedIn, and yeah, you can reference it, be like, hey, I may recognize my name, been trying to get in touch, would love to connect on here. And then also, that's the beauty around using LinkedIn and a multi-channel. On LinkedIn, you don't have to do any of that, like trying to book a meeting on LinkedIn. That can like purely be, would love to connect on here as well, would love to be connected, saw some of your content you're sharing, it looks really valuable, would be great to connect on here, because you've got that like you're approaching from different angles. So the LinkedIn as well, you can like, again, keep true to that like social element, that like social platform, that like personal piece, and just stay, yeah, I'm trying to connect, would be great to speak to you on here as well. And then kind of like follow up via email. So there's, yeah, lots of pieces you can play around with there. And I know we're constantly, like saying, like constantly testing and trialing like different ways. But that's, yeah, hopefully that gives you some ideas on how you can make the most of it as well when you're using it alongside email and phone as well.
Nice. We did have one more question. Dan, I know that you had a couple of questions that went unanswered. I have copy and pasted them into a note for myself. I will shoot you an email after this to tackle the ones that we didn't get a chance to cover. One more question from Evan Parson. How do you track your outreach and follow-ups?
That is a very good question. So it depends as well on whether you're using multi-channel or single channel. So multi-channel, like lots of platforms out there, like Outreach. I know the LinkedIn stages are manual, but you can like track like at what point you are with a prospect, what tasks you have coming up and activities. So that's a good way to like pop in reminders, like the profile view one, or whatever it may be. That's a great way to track. I know there are lots of similar kind of tools out there as well. So kind of standard one. There are also on the LinkedIn automation tool front, I know there are a few out there. I know Sarah said before, like you have to be super careful with these, because ultimately like they do have an element of yeah, just kind of like shooting out way higher volume than LinkedIn or kind of prospects would like. But some of them, if you do have a look at have a like couple of demos, some of them have good tracking features as well. So you can track, for example, how many people have replied to a certain campaign. You can tag responses. So for example, you could tag it as positive, yeah, great, let's have a meeting, neutral, not a good time, or negative, like this is a bad fit, this isn't relevant to us, or whatever it may be. And then that's really good to kind of like go back and analyze the data and kind of like download reports and stuff. And also it really lends itself to experimenting, because as well, it's all very good of us to be like, go and launch all these experiments, but then you're trying to find who's in what experiment and what list was that, and how like have I finished that list, or where did this prospect come from, which experiment did they fall into, or is it just an organic like LinkedIn connection? So I'd say when some of the automation tools, like I wouldn't peddle the volume side of it, but when it comes to doing the smaller list, they're great for then like tracking what happens next, getting some of the stats, getting some of that data, and it can make it way easier. So as for specific ones, I mean, there are so many out there. I think it would be down to having a look, like G2 Crowd or something, having a bit of a Google and seeing like what exactly you're after when it comes to the features, and then having a chat with them and just focusing on like what are your reporting capabilities, how can I track campaigns, how can I track performance of like specific campaigns and lists. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, guys, for being here again. Thank you all again for your engagement, your questions. It's honestly makes this so fun and makes us be able to tackle so much more relevant stuff for you guys when you ask the questions, and we can kind of tailor what we're talking about. So thank you so much for all your engagement and all your questions. Thank you for those of you who volunteered your LinkedIn profiles. I know Evan, we didn't get to yours. I have also saved your link, and I will shoot you a little email kind of covering that after this. Want to remind you guys all again that next Thursday is our first ever super stream. We're going to have Josh Braun, Kevin Gilman, Rex Biberston, Colin, Brandon, Tyler, myself, a good crowd of people chatting about leveraging LinkedIn. So we'll touch kind of more on in further detail on some of the talks we talked about here. We'll talk about the secret formula to building sequences that convert, and we will talk about psychological prospecting, the quick fixes that maximize replies. So please all subscribe, tell your friends, be there next Thursday for our super stream. Thank you so much, Lavinia, for being our expert on today's PredRev Live and sharing all that incredible wealth of knowledge with us.
Thank you for having me. No, enjoyed it as always. It's great.
Nice. Yeah, so thank you guys so much. As always, if you guys would like to chat further about these topics, you can add me on LinkedIn, you can add Lavinia on LinkedIn, you can ask us your questions. If you are interested in LinkedIn outbound and prospecting over LinkedIn, but you don't want to do it yourself, we can do it for you. So you can add me on LinkedIn, tell me that you want to talk about that, send me an email at sarah@predictablerevenue.com, and we can certainly talk about how we could take on that prospecting for you, whether it be multi-channel or LinkedIn. But yeah, as always, thank you guys so much for being here. Can't wait to see you all next week.
Yeah, thank you for joining, everyone. Great to speak to you. Bye. Take care.
Bye.